A monkey here, a monkey there, 100 monkeys everywhere. I just got back, Ramona, Elizabeth and I just got back from that conference at ECETI. And one thing that really stood out for me this year was watching the process work in other people. Watching them actually go through that internal work, bringing out those things from inside that they need to address and work on for themselves. It was really visible for me this time, and us doing this show and being very conscious of the growth that humanity is going through. This brings us up to the forefront of my mind, where I'm actually looking for the process that is working in other people. And, I just find it very heartening this was the first conference that I've been at where it was so visible that people were working through things. And it brings that optimism up to a new level,
Yeah, and you also did excellent work. I gotta commend you with the interviews, the video interviews. If you go over to the archive, and then it'll say archive 2012, archive 2011, and then down to video interviews. Click on that, and Tom has 4 interviews. One with John Kelly, Emilia Benz, Renato Longato, and who's the other gentleman? That was an excellent
Michael
interview.
Benedetti. Yeah, actually one of those amazing lights that I happened to meet while I was there. Another craftsman, and yeah, that was good stuff. Yeah, check them out. I would have liked to have gotten more while I was there, but man, there was just so much going on every single day that not only was it hard to corner somebody to take 30 or 45 minutes of their time, but it was hard for me to find 30 or 45 minutes of my time. So yeah, it was a busy week. So we had a good time, and it turned out really well. So kudos to ECETI and the ECETI crew for putting on another wonderful conference. So, oh man, I don't know.
We got... Oh, go ahead, Tom.
No, you go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, make sure you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Tom's YouTube. And if you scroll down, you can link on all of those. Also, that conference, the Pythagoras conference, and that's on October 10th to the 14th at Horseshoe, Southern Indiana. And you can check that out. That will be from October 10th to the 14th, as I said before. And if you buy a ticket through us, we get a small portion of that. So that really helps us out. So you kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, we want to thank all of our listeners and our members for all the support that you guys do give us. It makes a lot of difference and means the world to us. So
yeah.
So tonight on the show we have Thomas P. Fusco. Is a independent researcher who has devoted nearly 3 decades of investigating the relationship between mind, physics, spirituality, parapsychology, scientific anomalies, and paranormal phenomena, with the goal of uncovering the underlying cosmological framework that has eluded mankind for generations. Now, he put out a book, The Cosmic Veil, and I haven't had a chance to read the whole thing, but what I have read has I don't know, this is some really good work. Thomas, welcome to the 100th Monkey Radio.
How's it going, guys?
Oh, you know what? It is beautiful here today. So, I couldn't ask for more. I'm talking with some people that are out there walking the walk and talking the talk, and I am enjoying the sunshine streaming through my window. And oh yeah, life is good.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, so Thomas, let's start with a little bit about who you are, and if you give me a quick background, where you're from and what brought you around to actually writing this book.
Well, I was always one of those people who had to know why. You know, as a child, I was very inquisitive and always needed to know the whys and the wherefores behind everything. I was always very scientifically minded and very pragmatic about things as well. I had several experiences in my teens and early 20s that caused me to call into question the model of the universe that I had been taught in physics. That particular model just didn't accommodate these kinds of paranormal or supernatural type experiences. And so for me, the compelling question became, how is the universe put together that could allow these kinds of things to occur, that could accommodate these kinds of things? And so that's basically what started me on working on some sort of a cosmological model that would not only be scientifically relevant and consistent with the findings of physics, not necessarily the theories of physics, but the findings of physics, and also accommodate events like I said, like supernatural or paranormal, what people would call those things. And so it took me close to 30 years to put that all together and publish it in a book form.
So is there a difference between supernatural and paranormal?
I think that the differences are one of semantics. The way I look at it is this. One of the elements that I ran into very early on in my research was this idea of what do these words mean? How do we define them specifically? And so I found that the current definitions of what those things were just simply not adequate. The paranormal, for example, has been traditionally used as some sort of a catch-all basket that anything weird and unusual gets thrown into it. But for me, that wasn't good enough. There had to be something more specific. So what I came upon is the understanding that what constitutes a paranormal phenomena or a supernatural phenomena is the same thing, and that it is a physical effect that is physically observable and often is observed to interact physically with the surrounding environment, but has no direct physical cause locally connected to the event, to the effect. And just to give you an example, in our we're having a conversation right now. The reason why we're able to hear that effect of that conversation is because we have a compression wave of a specific frequency and amplitude agitating and vibrating the air molecules that serve as a medium to carry those waves to our ears or to a recording device, which is then translated into sensible and recognizable audible patterns. Those effects are physical, but the difference between a normal and a paranormal voice would be the cause. So in a normal voice, we have a set of vocal cords that is locally, physically connected to the air that is then being vibrated as the effect that reaches our ears. In a paranormal voice, like a disembodied voice, there is no set of vocal cords locally connected to the effect. We have the effect alone without an apparent locally detectable or connected cause to that effect. And physics calls this non-local causality, or non-locality for short. And so for me, paranormal and supernatural would be, again, a physical effect, physically interacting with its environment that is observable, because if it wasn't physical, you couldn't observe it, with no direct physical cause locally connected to it.
Right. So, it's always kind of, I don't know, it's kind of baffled me how a disembodied spirit, a being who has passed the death veil, is able to actually manifest on this plane. Have you worked that out on how are they able to bring about some sort of physical manifestation?
Well, the question that you're asking brings a broader subject to bear. Because a lot of times, well, I would say a lot of research and thinking that has been put into this field previously to this has gotten tied up a little bit in looking at the specific details about a specific phenomenon and not being able to step back and take a more generalized view. For example, it's like what you just mentioned about how would a spirit or a person passed on enter into our realm in some way and affect it. I liken that to one of the old TV commercials, and most people remember seeing this, and I think it was actually about an automobile, where it shows a person essentially driving down a road, but that the car is invisible. All
right.
You see is the person floating down the road in a seated position, holding an invisible steering wheel and moving down the road. Well, if you think about the movement down the road as the effect, and you think about the person that's floating down the road is some sort of a intelligence, what has always been missing in the equation is the description of the car. What is that automobile? What does it look like? It's not enough to say the spirit causes this or the spirit does that. What's been missing in our understanding is the nature of that automobile. And so this is where my work has been focused. And the other aspect of it is that we need different ways to look at the universe. We need new paradigms. And so one of the aspects of my work is to look at the universe, the entire universe, in terms of materialized and materializing information. There's a lot of different ways that we can perceive reality around us and look at it. But when we stand at that particular place and think about everything, the entire universe, being an expression of materialized information, then we begin to start looking at things in a way that helps us better understand it. For example, in a disembodied voice or a normal voice, essentially what you're talking about is a materialized pattern of information.
Right.
And when we start looking at the universe this way, then it not only actually sheds some light on current scientific enigmas, but also on phenomena like paranormal and supernatural. So we have to see these voices, for example, as an expression of information. Now, we only have two questions really then to answer. What is the source of that information? And what is the process by which information can materialize into a physically observable effect?
Right. So it's mainly then what is the observable effect would be kind of the way I'm picking this up is that the observable effect depends on the equipment that's being used to observe with. whether it be a human being or some electronic equipment. One person may be equipped to be able to see this stuff better than another.
That's actually a very, very good way of looking at it, because you mentioned a very important point. Whereas regardless to whether we're talking about an organic device like the human being, a human brain, with all of its receivers, its different kinds of receivers that input that information into the brain, like our eyes, our ears, our senses, or a technological device that can detect, observe, and record and measure these effects. The whole idea, and you're on the right track, is that these are ways of observing and measuring information. So yes, that concept begins to help us break out of the confines that this field has been locked into for so many decades, and start to extend beyond it and understand a lot more of what's going on.
Right.
Is it when you hear a disembodied voice? Because both I don't know, Tom, if you've ever experienced that, but I have.
Oh yeah.
And is it that they're vibrating the air, or they're vibrating something different? And I'm guessing here. So let's just say like the magnetic field that a human person puts off. Are they vibrating maybe that?
So are you going towards why one person would hear it, where one next to him wouldn't hear it, Ramon?
Exactly.
Well, again, you are on the right track, and what I'd like to do, you brought up another point. I'll clarify that. It's a good time to do it early on here. I am a theorist. I am not a paranormal investigator. So I do not go out into, at haunted sites and observe these things and detect them and investigate for them. Essentially what I do is I accept the evidence that has been gathered by others.
Right.
And my theory is not specifically about the paranormal. It's about the way the universe is put together. This is another thing that's very unique about it, in that if you could think about my theoretical work as being like a house that has a certain structure and it has a lot of different rooms in it. Well, one of the rooms is paranormal. One of the rooms is astrophysics. One of the rooms is quantum mechanics. This kind of an idea. So I've not directly investigated any of these kinds of things myself. I just accept the body of evidence of other investigators. It's like what I say to people, well, you know all about what the surface of the moon looks like. Have you ever been there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So with that, unless you got something else about the paranormal, because he brought up something else that I want to talk
Go ahead,
about.
jump in, Ramon.
I was going to say, what is theory? Because I heard you saying on another show, and I forgot who it was, but you were explaining how people take theory as reality. So can you break down for us what is theory? Because there's many theories that are taken as being reality, especially in the scientific realm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's a couple aspects to that, and I think that one of the things that you're talking about is actually what I would talk about as a paradigm. The other aspect of it is, what is a theory? And there are different kinds of theories. In the field of paranormal / supernatural / parapsychology, there's a ton of theories out there. There's a lot of philosophical and metaphysical speculations and, theoretical models which attempt to explain these kinds of things. But there's a difference between that, all of that, and what is known as a scientific theory. A lot of people hear the word theory and they lump it all in the same box, say, well, this is theoretical. But the distinction between all of those other things, which has predominated this field of study, and a scientific theory, is that a scientific theory makes specific predictions about certain aspects of reality that then can be tested through scientifically engineered experiments. And that's the difference between a theory and a scientific theory. Scientific theory makes testable predictions. And that is the nature of my particular work. It actually is, from what other people say and from what I know, is the first scientific theory of the paranormal. As far as paradigms go, the way of looking at things, yes, that definitely colors the way we look at the universe, based on how we perceive the universe as being. And the example I use is the Aristotelian model of the solar system, Aristotle's model, where he saw the Earth at the center and all of the heavenly bodies, the planets, embedded in these giant crystalline, glass-like, transparent spheres that wrapped around the Earth and turned. And so when people looked up in the night sky, this is how they perceived what they were seeing. They saw these objects embedded in these spheres. They saw the stars embedded in a very larger sphere. Some of the ancients also believed that it was some sort of a solid sphere with holes punched in it so that light shone through, and that's what the stars would be. In actually early up to almost the mid-20th century, I mean, we're talking less than 100 years ago, even in our advanced sciences of that time, the entire universe was considered our galaxy. Our galaxy was the universe.
Right.
These other clusters that looked like galaxies, we just considered them as being, clusters of stars inside of our own galaxy. Most people are surprised that that view of the universe is not that old.
Yeah.
But when we look at the night sky now, we see something very different, and we have a very different perception of what we're looking at. And yet, the light, the information that is being conveyed by those waves of light that enter into our eyes is the exact same collection of information as it was thousands of years ago. But what our brains see, quote unquote, is something very different than the ancients saw.
So, with that being said, do you think that some of these clusters of galaxies that we see could be other universes?
Well, I think that we have enough information now to conclude that all of those bodies are part of a singular universe. And our perception or our knowledge of how big that universe is always expanding and getting larger as our instruments advance in sensitivity and range, where we can detect information coming to us from further and further out. But they are part of our same universe, and we certainly have the evidence that the physical laws and principles that govern our particular area of space applies throughout the entire universe that we can see. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to do things like measure differences or distances, rather. Take a look at the light coming from those very, very distant objects, and through a spectral analysis, find out very specific things about their size, their mass, their velocity. That could not be done by us if the mathematics that worked here did not also work out at the farthest edges of that universe. And so we know the laws and principles that govern our singular universe apply everywhere that we can observe.
So does your theory allow for multi-universe, the multiverse thing, the multiple universe?
Actually, what's interesting is my theory actually kind of rains on the multiverse parade. And again, one of the ways that we can look at this most clearly is to understand what we're seeing, what we observe as materialized and materializing information. So what we have with the multiverse, the idea of the multiverse, is specifically as it's used in paranormal and supernatural quote-unquote theories, is to find another material source of information. This is one of the challenges that faces modern physics that my theory tries to solve, and it also faces the same challenge faces paranormal investigators. Where is this information coming from? Now, if you're a materialist, which means that you believe that everything is confined in the physical material boundaries of space and time, matter and energy, then what you're going to need is to find an additional source of material to explain the observations that we're seeing. So this is where a lot of people attempt to use this multiverse idea. Essentially what they're saying, well, gee, we can't find the source of the information in our universe for a disembodied voice, so let's just imagine, make up another universe, which is a completely different collection of physical information, and then just borrow material from that other universe and bring it into ours, and boom, problem solved. We observe close to 90% more gravitational lensing, the bending of space, which is always associated with gravitational fields, in our universe. Close to 90% more of that than there is visible mass adjacent to it to allegedly cause that bending of space. So we've run out of material to see all the to explain all the gravitational forces we see. So we just make up an imaginary substance called dark matter.
Dark matter, right?
Yeah, and poof, problem solved.
So how do you resolve the anomalous information?
Well, I think that after many years of looking at this, I've come to accept the idea that there is a coherent and orderly collection of information, data, order, pattern, matrix, structure, however you want to use it, because all of those things are expressions of information that exist outside and above the four dimensions of space and time that constitutes what we know as the physical. This is a very, very old idea. It dates all the way back to, I guess, the first attempt to try to scientifically frame this would be Plato's work, where he called it forms, and that these were actually structures and what we would call today coherent collections of information, which wouldn't have been seen like that in that time because they were centuries away from a digital age where we understand what information truly is.
Right.
He saw these as structures and forms that gave rise to the physical structures and forms that we see. The idea also is seen in the Bible, in the Old Testament. It would be considered the wisdom of God. In the New Testament, it would be called the Logos, which is the Greek word that is used in the first paragraph of the chapter of John. In the beginning was the Logos. There's no equivalent English translation. We have translated it as the term word, but in the Greek, that logos meant pattern, thought, matrix, mind, image. It had all of that type of meaning wrapped up in that one word. And so the Bible in that point says, in the beginning there was the logos, there was this information, that all things were made through this pattern of information. We get into modern times and we take a look at Sigmund Freud, his idea, he called it psychoid entities. Edgar Cayce called it the Akasha. He said this was the body of information from which he was able to extract not only what was wrong specifically medically with certain people that were maybe thousands of miles remote, but also find solutions and how to heal these things came from this body of information. The most prominent physicist of one of the most prominent physicists of the 20th century, David Bohm, called it implicate order. He said that this was a collection of information that resided outside and above space and time, and that it would materialize into what he called explicate order, which was the four-dimensional realm of space-time, matter, and energy, barriered by the speed of light and lower velocities underneath of it. It's also been called configuration space. My particular version of it is called supergeometry, and it forms the foundations of my theory of supergeometrics. And the reason why I used that particular term was, number one, I felt out of all the terms that have been used before, the word geometry actually gives a human mind something more tangible, some sort of a concept that we can kind of wrap our heads around, so to speak, and convey the proper mental impression of what is meant. And the word super, which is a standard term used in physics to describe a superset of something else. And so this is a superset of our own physical reality. And so this pattern of information is what I call supergeometry. But what differs, again, as it specifically relates to the paranormal, is that I'm not just talking about this as being a source of information for paranormal effects. I'm speaking about this as a source of information for the entire creation.
Right.
The paranormal being a certain aspect of that creation or a room within that building, which we would call the universe.
I think key word in paranormal is normal. It is normal functioning of same thing with supernatural, the word natural. They're all normal and standard functions of this existence that we find ourselves in.
Yes, from a perspective that we understand the universe being a very specific construction that has it is constrained by a very specific set of laws and principles that define it, and it cannot vary from those laws and principles. Yes, everything is normal that happens in the physical universe. However, if we move our perspective as an observer and move it from a different place where we're looking at the specific event itself, so we observe an effect, but we cannot detect or see any physical local cause connected to it. From that perspective, then we have a distinction between what is normal and what is paranormal. It just depends on what part of the universe that you're looking at and what it is that you're looking, from where you're looking.
Right.
This kind of relates to what we were talking about earlier, that, what we see as reality varies depending on, the paradigm or what logical framework that we stand on and from where we look out upon it.
Right. So, the observer effect. Now, we've been talking a lot about instruments of measurement and instruments to observe phenomena or even daily reality. And I know that there's been theories and experiments out there that prove that the observer or the equipment that is doing the observing can have an effect on the outcome of whatever it is that's being observed. Now, have you found this, and is this part of your theory also?
Well, again, this has to do with perspective. If we look, what I call the grand supergeometry of the universe, in other words, this is the body of information that is the whole enchilada. Call it the Akashic record, if you will. Call it the Logos, if you will. If we look at this entire body of information, this supergeometric framework from which everything emerges that's physical, we can see that everything in the universe is connected with and is a portion of that exact same framework, which is, of course, including both the observer and the observed. It relates to the philosophical concept that everything is interconnected, or even a religious concept like that. And so what happens with the observer and the observed is part of the same reality.
Well, isn't that the scientific also, as far as the entanglement is concerned? Yes, and you're absolutely right. You're going down the right logical direction with this. See, because for me, since paranormal effects are part of physical reality, they must comply with the same laws and principles by which the entire realm of physical reality is governed. And of course, we're still in the process of discovering, all those laws and principles. But yes, you're absolutely right. So for me, when I take this non-locality definition of the paranormal and I look at certain aspects of quantum physics, I come up with a different conclusion than most people that you've read about or heard about or even interviewed talk about. They talk about trying to define the paranormal in terms of quantum physics, physical effects. They'll use these terms like looks like, sounds like, reminds me of, this kind of an idea. But for me, the paradigm is very different. If we're going to call the paranormal as a physical effect with no locally connected physical cause, then that means that other effects are quote-unquote paranormal. So a lot of the non-local effects we see in quantum physics are actually, to me, in my book and in my thinking, these are also paranormal effects. It's not that the paranormal is quantum physical. It's that quantum physics is paranormal. And then when we begin to open our minds and look at it this way, we begin to unify all of these scientific and observational findings that we have, and we begin to not only form a greater coherent picture of what reality is, but we begin to break down those traditional barriers. Whereas mainstream physics says, hey, paranormal, we're not going there. Psychology, we're not going there. That's not our field. Well, excuse me, folks, the study of physics, by definition, is the study of everything that is physical. Right.
And so physics, in its disciplinary form, is supposed to uncover everything that is physical. It is only physicists, the humans that practice it, that make these distinctions and prejudices.
Yeah, I found through doing this show and my own personal research prior to starting this show that the scientific community is pretty narrow-minded, or they've got blinders on, especially when it comes to their particular field. as far as bringing in information that is not, you know, vetted and peer reviewed and published, and even these papers that I've seen papers that have gone out for peer review that had some remarkable things on them, but they had something in there that was outside of the bounds of the adopted and accepted belief structures, so it would be just pushed aside and not even considered. You know,
Right.
are you seeing that as a big problem in our scientific community now, or is that improving? Are there more people who are doing this in the scientific research and the investigation actually broadening their minds?
Well, I think that you know, physics is becoming a bit more receptive to some of these quote-unquote fringe ideas. But it's not something that has to do with anything noble about expanding one's mind. It has more to do with what I would look at like a shotgun wedding.
Yeah.
You know, what the problem is this. There's a number of issues that are facing physics in this field. One of the problems that we have in physics today is that in the past, our powers of observation were limited by our instrumentation that we had. And so consequently, when we found a physical effect with this instrumentation, we were eventually able to find a physical material local cause connected to it. But over the last several decades, we have accumulated so many observations that we have reached a point in physics where we have literally, simply, and really elementarily run out of material to explain all the observations. We have more physical observations than there is material in the universe to explain it. And this is where the shotgun wedding comes in, where it's like, well, gee, once we run out of material and we can't explain these physical effects by physical causes, we don't have a one-to-one correspondence anymore. We have more physical effects than there are physical causes in the universe to explain them. Then they can begin to open their minds and look at other alternatives. Of course, in the field of paranormal, what's unique about it is not only do we see all the time physical effects with no local physical causes, but we also see them occur in real time.
Yeah.
We're not observing things that are so stable, like the planet Earth or the sun, that persist for millions of years. We're actually seeing information materialize and dematerialize in front of our eyes in real time, and are able to measure them and observe them and record them. And so the two fields are merging of nature, by their very nature of their progression. What has always been lacking has been a scientifically relevant theoretical framework that not only provides explanations, but also makes predictions. So for the first time in history, we have a framework now through the work that I've done and an associate that we'll talk about in a little bit, I'm sure, where I can say, based on the evidence of paranormal observations, I can make predictions about astrophysics, about quantum physics, and then you go and frame the experiments, and you'll find exactly what I predicted based on this body of information. That is something that science can no longer ignore. We are now at a point where the paranormal field doesn't have to scream and cry, "Hey, scientists, please come into our ring and play with us."
You know, it's almost felt like there was a coordinated effort on some level to keep the sciences split apart.
Oh, yeah. Yep, and there are reasons behind that as well, both overt and subversive. But with this kind of a scientific framework and experimental evidence to validate it, I can take this, go into their boxing ring on their home turf, using their game rules, their home rules, and give them a black eye.
There we go. So this is
what the field has never had before.
We're in the great unveiling. I mean, we're starting to really understand who and what we are on this planet, and what our purpose here is. So, man, what exciting times to be here,
Absolutely.
So I'm curious, what is your thought with the whole UFO phenomena?
Well, this is very interesting, and it brings up a aspect of my work that I talk about in terms of how to keep, a clear mind when looking at these things. Because what so often happens when we observe paranormal or supernatural phenomena, which certainly UFOs can loosely fall under that category, is that when we see these kinds of events that we have no explanation for within our current paradigm, basically the paradigm, even non-scientific paradigms that we just use to walk through and engage in our day-to-day lives, when we see these kinds of things that we can't explain, it tends to shut off the reason. The reason kind of gets put aside because it's not working for us anymore. And so we kind of abandon the reason and just become stupefied with the event.
So, what do you mean by the reason?
Well, our rational parts of ourselves. In other words, the human brain has a number of different functions, and built into it is a power of reason, a power of thought, if you will, a calculating type of thought, an ability to form patterns and to recognize order within that pattern, and then to conduct the body that the human brain is connected to according to the order of those patterns of information. And so that's what what I call our reason.
Okay.
And we tend to abandon that when we see these kinds of events like UFOs and paranormal and that kind of thing. So to help clarify that, in these kinds of instances, in the paranormal and supernatural, what I have done has taken a position like a police force with various types of investigative teams. So one of the teams that we have in the police force is the criminologist. And the criminologist is going to concern him or herself with who done it, what their motivation was, why they did it at this place to this person, for what motivation and what reason, on and on and on. Unfortunately, the study of the paranormal and ufology has been dominated by the criminologists.
Right.
Everybody focuses, and they use as the connective tissue to form that pattern of understanding for that specific class of phenomena. As the perpetrator, that becomes the cause. It's back to that picture I talk about with the person rolling down the road with no visible car. Everything is focused on the criminologist. So when it comes to the UFOs, everything is focused upon who done it. Is it the aliens? Is it the men in black? Is it back ops? Is it, interdimensional beings? And in the paranormal, everything is done to the ghost. The ghost did this. The ghost drained this energy. The ghost made that book fly across the shelf. Everything is criminology. Now, we're not saying that there isn't a criminal involved, that there is the perpetrator. And I'm using the word criminal, metaphorically. I'm not saying that everything is evil. The perpetrator. But there's another aspect to this whole field, and that is the forensics. The forensics studies the physics of the crime scene. And so the forensics doesn't concern himself with the criminologist, other than sharing information. He's focused on that invisible car, to build that car from the ground up, from the inside up, and say, here is the picture of the actual physical mechanism that causes this person to be floating down the road, so to speak. So when we take the UFOs and we take out the black ops and we take out the aliens, temporarily, we're just putting them aside. And then we look at paranormal hauntings and we remove the spirit for a moment. We find that the actual physical effects are almost identical. That what occurs in a haunted house, those kinds of physical observations, are the same kinds of quote-unquote paranormal aspects or qualities that we see with the physical observations that we call UFOs. Now, if I was going to extend that one step further and bring in the criminologist now, then I could say that we know that the paranormal effect is something that is natural. It's something that's been occurring and being observed for thousands of years, that didn't involve any technology. It has to do with laws and principles governing the way the universe is put together to allow these things to happen. But when we look at UFOs and we see things that are very clearly apparently artificial constructions, then we have to come to the conclusion that whoever is the perpetrator has actually discovered the laws and principles that govern the paranormal effect and have designed technology based on these principles.
Good point. Good point.
Yeah.
See, what I'm doing, I know some of my answers are very lengthy, but what I'm trying to do, what I've done is say, you know what, Tom, forget everything that you know. Forget everything that everybody else is telling you about the way things are, and then stand back and take a clear look of what it actually looks like. What are you actually seeing and observing? And so when I give these lengthy explanations, what I'm actually trying to do is to talk about these new paradigms that if people can adopt them, then suddenly, like you said, and like my book says, the veil lifts, and certain things become crystal clear and almost childlike obvious.
I was going to say the eyes of the child.
Yes, where before they were a cloudy, nebulous ambiguity.
Right. Okay, well, I think we're going to end this first segment on that. And Thomas, where are you? Where can people pick up the Cosmic Veil at? And do you do any presentations or appearances anywhere?
Well, the first part of that, the book is Behind the Cosmic Veil, a new vision of reality merging science, the spiritual, and the supernatural. About the book, my blog, my latest appearances where I'm going to be appearing, and where to order the book can all be found at www.cosmicveil, spelled V-E-I-L, cosmicveil.com. And no, I've had some invitations, to appear as a guest speaker, but none of those events have come to pass yet.
Well, I'll look for you in that venue also. From what I'm picking up so far, it might be a really nice fit for you. So, okay, well, guys, thanks for listening to the first segment, and we will talk to you in the members section. Condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance.
The love you deny is the pain you carry.
All right, we'll see you on the flip side.